So hello, everybody. I believe this is our 12th hour. We're halfway, or at the end of this hour, we will be halfway through these 12 hours or 24 hours together. And more importantly, we have reached midday in Missoula, Montana, which is where Allie, Kathleen, and I all live. So we finally, after all of this time, we finally have gotten to my time zone, or our time zone, and it feels like quite an accomplishment to get to this point. So this is 24 hours of Project-Based Learning Plus, and Frank, who just stepped away, and Gabriel, who I can see next to me, who I don't know where he is on your screen, and I are the founders of Project-Based Learning Plus. And this is the first time we've ever tried to do this. Maybe it's the first time anybody's tried to do this, I don't know. And we are treating this as our beta version with much to learn and with a desire to replicate this in some way, likely to be tremendously more interactive than some of the bits and pieces that we've done along the way, with better security, as those of you that were with us 8 hours ago remember the Zoom bombing. And probably higher levels of student involvement, which we had envisioned doing more of, and in some ways the global pandemic actually restricted us because some students working from home weren't necessarily able to get in and join us. So we're all learning together, and we're trying to keep that spirit alive throughout the day. So in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Allie and Kathleen, who have a really fascinating company called Inspired Classroom here in Missoula, Montana, and strategically create all kinds of online and blended learning experiences for kids all over the country. And so they were just absolutely ready to go. 6 weeks ago, as we all locked down, they had absolutely everything they needed, I'm sure. And hopefully you all capture my sarcasm in that comment. So they're promising some interactive pieces, and I'm gonna, at some point, I'll probably just start asking you a whole bunch of questions. So, and again, I'll be paying attention to the chat and see what else appears.
Great.
So you can share your screen or whatever you want to do.
We will.
You got it.
Thanks, Nick. And we are so happy to be with you. And so first of all, I want everybody to get their hands in the air. And even if I can't see you, you need to do it because I know there's non-participating. And we're going to do some jazz hands for Earth Day and 24 hours of PBL. Woo! Oh, let's do it. Let's wiggle. Yeah. So, yeah, both Allie and I come from elementary teaching backgrounds, and when we do workshops with high school teachers and college educators, they kind of moan because we're like, you know, we are peppy and sometimes over the top. So just be ready for that. And Nick, we feel your pain on the whole Zoom issues. We have been working through that with our partners and have come up with some pretty creative solutions. So if you want to talk later, we can do that. So anyway, I'm going to start sharing my screen because more to keep Allie and I on task than for you all, just because we tend to go off on tangents a lot. So hopefully this will help. But what we'd like to do is do this as a conversation with us. And so we're going to start by asking each other questions because that's what we do all day long. We work side by side together. And then we're going to also turn the table a little bit and ask you all some of the same questions. First of all, I would love to see in the chat box where you all are from. So we just tuned in. So just go ahead and put in the chat box just so we get an idea of where you are coming from in this wonderful world. And we're going to share a little bit about our world, our piece of the world that Nick and Allie and I are in just a minute. Bogota, Rhode Island, Brookings, Kent. Woo, woo, I love it. Vancouver, the Galapagos. Man, can we come down? That would be so awesome. Yay. Oh, this is just amazing. It's so exciting to have this technology at our fingertips and be able to do this. It's just really amazing. And so Allie and I are going to share a bit of our journey with using this technology and also building on it. So Allie, I'm going to start off with you. Hi, Allie.
Hello, how you doing?
Swimming there in the mountains. I want to know, Allie, where did you first encounter project-based learning? What's your background?
I love it. So the first place I encountered project-based learning, I didn't understand or know enough to know that I was actually encountering project-based learning. And that was in my formal training as an educator, and I'm actually a certified K-12 art teacher. And something, I don't know if you have any other art teachers out there, but something that a lot of people don't necessarily know is that going back to the beginning of art education, this is how we've been taught, is by using a project-based approach to teach art. And so you can almost say that being an art teacher is like the prototype for project-based learning. So that was really the first time that I encountered it. I then became a art specialist and pre-K teacher at a small school in Missoula, Montana that was a progressive school that really focused a lot on project-based learning. And at that point, that's where I was more formally introduced to it as a way to teach general subjects as well, besides just art. So I don't know, Kathleen, what about you? Where did you first encounter project-based learning?
Well, Allie, I'm a lot older than you. And I got to say that clear back in my teaching career, I think the first 2 years in the late 80s, early 90s, I encountered things like Talents Unlimited. Some of you may remember those days. And also had a real desire to serve gifted students. So even as a traditional class teacher, our district gave us a lot of training in gifted ed. And then when I moved to Montana, I coordinated a program for gifted students that really emphasized thinking processes rather than content. So not accelerating vertically, but expanding horizontally. And then I went to the dark side, became an administrator. And as part of that was a curriculum director and was trying to infiltrate project-based learning into the curriculum work we were doing. So that's kind of where I come from. And I'd love to hear just a snippet, if anybody wants to put it in the chat box, what your background, how long have you been trying to do this? What's your background in project-based learning? I think that's fun to see. So while they're doing that, Allie, how come you are still doing this if you've done this for a while?
That's a good question. I truly believe that this is best teaching and learning practices, and experiencing education myself as a student, my children watching their education, myself as a teacher, and then as an owner of Inspired Classroom, I see that some of the stickiest learning, the most cognitive sweat, and I know these are words that we're going to explore a little bit later on, but this is where the magic happens in learning. And we'll get into the rest of it later, but for me, it's just seeing students of all abilities succeed, struggle, and I love to watch students struggle. I think it's super important, and connect with authentic learning. So for me, that's it. How about you, Kathleen?
Well, I think, I totally agree with you. And we're seeing some great things, people that have been trying this since 2005, and designing buildings that will do this. And that makes me laugh, I've got to say, because I can remember teaching a workshop on differentiated learning, which, we've all heard that for years, in my school, and the teacher said, well, it's really hard for us to put things in groups because the chairs are attached to the desks. It just doesn't work very well. And it's so true. It's such a big complex thing to do. But why I stayed committed to it was that I think it's particularly my high ability students that I was working with, where they would come to me for this type of project-based, really deep learning. And it was almost like they would just sigh with relief finally and go, I get it. And then they'd get frustrated, and that was super fun. And then they would feel so accomplished once they got through something. And a lot of them had never experienced failure or, you know, not being able to get the right answer. And so that was so fun for me to hurt their brains a little bit and get them to extend that thinking. And that I believe it's some of the most fun teaching I've ever had too. And so I believe teachers should have fun. And so, you know, we need to be designing things that are interesting for us, because then that passion passes on to students. So that's why I've kind of kept the torch burning all of these years. So I mentioned a couple problems, Allie. What other problems have you encountered along the way? What roadblocks to really deep project-based learning have you encountered in your work?
You know, for me, when I made the transition as a teacher to teaching, to being an art teacher and a regular classroom teacher, finding the support, and even though we were a school that did support project-based learning, and that was really what we were built on, finding those resources. And this was before we could just hop online super duper easily. Internet was there, but not in its capacity today, and find those resources. And so it really felt like I had to build everything absolutely from scratch. And that was hard. As a business owner who's trying to help other teachers be successful with project-based learning type projects, I think that sometimes there's a big roadblock from going from how you were traditionally trained to teaching and thinking in a slightly different realm. And it's really scary. And it requires a lot of hand-holding at first. And so that's one of the things I see with other teachers. What were some of those roadblocks for you, Kathleen?
Well, I was just thinking about that because I know we're talking to an international audience, but I know in the US, those pendulum swings of policy that have come through, and the No Child Left Behind, and the real emphasis in teaching to the standards. And I'm a standards girl, I like those, but it kind of threw us off a road. And I do a lot of teaching of teachers, and it's fun to talk about the generations of teachers that we're living with, like the folks like me who started with whole language and thematic units and that kind of stuff, have a little bit easier entry point, I think, into project-based learning. The ones who went through guided instruction and that kind of thing, call and response, are a little bit more scripted, and they have a little bit harder time of having that freedom. And now the folks who have gone through the standards-based movement, I see some of that coming back around and saying, let's take the best of thematic units and put it with standards so there's accountability. And so I think there is, plus access to resources now is so much easier. But, you know, I think those are the kinds of roadblocks that I saw, particularly as an administrator too, is just the structures that are in place may not always support the kind of teaching and learning that we know is super amazing. And I'm seeing, let's see, hang on. Great, I'm seeing some great things coming through. EPI, hi EPI, and sea turtle research monitoring, traditional training limits, policy swings. Yep, Nick is agreeing with me. We've had a lot of conversations about that, Nick. And you know, we can only do what we can do within the structures that each of the countries or counties or states or whatever have. So first of all, I want to say before we continue on, if you have been journeying through this water of project-based learning for a while, or even if you're new to it, I want you to raise your right hand. I'm waiting. See, this is teacher wait time. Bend your elbow and pat yourselves on the back, because it is not always easy. It is not always easy. And so congratulations to you all who care about it and think it's important, and support it in whatever way you do, because we all know it's the best way to get learning to stick. So, Allie.
Yes, Kathleen.
Is there anything else you want to mention?
Oh, I think we should just keep going. But I will, one thing, if you have any questions, please interject. We are happy to pause, answer questions, hear comments, etc.
Yeah, we want to, this isn't really a presentation. It's a conversation. And so, yeah, jump in.
Converse with us.
Sure. And we're doing that in the chat. So we're asking people to put their questions in the chat so that the flow continues.
And so that you can have a record of it too. That's a good idea. Okay, here we go. Ready? So, Allie, go for it.
So who are we? What's Inspired Classroom? Inspired Classroom is a company that was, gosh, Kathleen and I founded Inspired Classroom in this iteration about almost 6 years ago. And we are built on the idea of authentic learning, equity of access, and support for educators. And what that looks like, what we actually do, is we combine interactive distance learning. So using platforms like Zoom to bring real world authentic experiences into the classroom. So that kind of hits on that equity of access. Not everybody has access to amazing, rich content or authentic experiences. So we can help bridge that equity of access using technology as a tool. We couple that with our proprietary scenario-driven inquiry-based platform, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But like I said, Inspired Classroom is built on equity of access, support for educators. Kathleen, I know you had some really great things to say about support of educators. You want to chime in on that one?
Sure. Yeah, one of the things that we see in the work that we do, and the things that I felt as an educator and Allie felt, and that I saw as an administrator, is when you have innovative teaching that people want to do, it's extremely important that you help them, because teaching is a complex effort. For example, in Montana, we deal a lot of times with small schools, and you may have one science educator for grades 3 through 12. But more importantly, Allie, I think you had a point, and that was what?
Well, it's just finding that sometimes it's so isolating being an educator. Not only are you separated in Montana by a large distance, you can be isolated in the middle of Hoboken, New Jersey, with 1 million people all around you. Trying to be innovative can be a very lonely lifestyle, as we probably all have experienced at some point or another. And so we find that teachers that are successful in the classroom require a little bit of extra hand-holding, getting ready, starting to think about this whole process. We have, if you think about those early adopters, we always have those superstar teachers that are ready to jump in, try new things, that have probably been teaching this way for 30 years. They pick up the type of projects that we're working on instantaneously, adapt them to their classroom needs of their students, etc. And then there's that next group that are willing to try, but don't really know how to start and feel a little timid and a little scared. And so we really, really focus on that middle group of educators to say, you want some help, let's do this. We'll have virtual teacher workshops. We'll create connections and networks so you can chat with one another, so you can ask us questions. We'll provide teachers that have experience teaching this way to ask questions to, and all sorts of other things, because that ultimately helps keep people moving in the right direction, and it helps prevent the people from throwing up their hands and saying, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, this is too challenging. So that's what I've known.
Well, I agree, and I think the research shows that if folks are not supported, they go back to teaching the way that they were taught.
Yeah.
Essentially. And they may have been taught in this manner, but chances are they were taught in a more traditional way. So I would like to ask anybody out there in the virtual world, add to our list of roadblocks or maybe success stories that you've had with equity of access or supporting educators or getting rich content.
So I'm kind of just chuckling here. Nick, you threw a question in the chat. Do you ever feel you were ahead of the curve of global disruption or a greater mindset shift was needed? Well, yeah.
Actually hilarious.
we have been talking about this, you know, on a daily basis with people.
For 6 years.
Well, yeah, but specifically during COVID-19, because suddenly people are coming to this and they're going, oh, I understand what you're trying to do. Oh, this makes so much sense. The kids need to be learning this deep understanding of things, and it's so hard to do in a distance platform, and nobody knows how to do it. Oh, that's what you do. So, yeah, I think that it's been a challenge. It's been a bit of an uphill battle, but who knows?
Yeah, it's fun though. So what we'd like to do right now is immerse you guys a little bit in our world, give you a sense of place of where we are, but also initialize you into one of our deep projects that we have with partners. And we haven't talked a lot about that, but when we said rich content, we are typically not the content creators. We are a little bit, but we have partner organizations that are amazing, that have super deep, rich content. So we want to immerse you in an experience from one of our partners, and then kind of talk through some of our ideas behind developing project-based learning in a way that's manageable and doable for, as Ali mentioned, that middle section of teachers who may want to do this but don't know where to start or how to start, or maybe need a little bit more support. So Ali, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, right?
Yep.
And you're going to share yours and kind of cue us up on this.
Yeah, you bet. So this is a short video developed.
Just relax and enjoy, really.
Yeah, developed by one of our content partners. So
the winter woods tend to be pretty quiet. You'll have magpies, you'll have crows, but often it's just the sound of the wind in the trees, your own footsteps. It's a beautiful time of like silence and solitude, just being out in the land. So Willow had a pretty rough start to life. She lost her mother and her sister just days apart when she was right about at the age where she would strike out on her own. And at that point in her life, there's no guarantee that she'd survive. What I love about mountain lions is they're so secretive. They're so elusive because there are a lot of them out there and we never see them. They're like ghosts on the landscape. I've never seen Willow in the flesh, but I've followed her tracks around for miles and miles. We started seeing her on cameras all the time. While we're out tracking, we're building a narrative from what we're finding on the landscape. And it's like being a detective because you can't come to a conclusion immediately.
I feel pretty strongly that we should try to minimize our, our effect on animals, our disturbance when we can. And so if we have these methods that are alternatives, then I think it's good to try to explore them and use them. So what we did was we went out and we collected biological samples while backtracking cats, mostly to their bed sites. Sometimes we just found little, what I call tracking treasures along the way. So this would be tufts of hair on branch tips or rose bushes, those types of things. And so by collecting hair from the bed sites and the natural hair snags, we were able to get a good answer that really was close to what we already knew was out there from the radiotelemetry methods.
Collaring cats can provide really excellent data, but we wanted to avoid those sorts of interactions. We wanted to try to be as hands-off as possible because we wanted to really limit the amount of disturbance on the landscape.
I feel like there's a lot that we can learn from just following the tracks. I don't feel like we have to be witnessing them engaging in certain behaviors. I've followed cats as they're playing. I've followed cats as they're hunting, and all of that comes through in the tracks. I've been doing this for 2 years and I've never seen a cat in the whole project. So we typically don't see cats, but that's the way we like it. When F2 was young, she spent a year of her life on her own in the Davis Creek area. And here we have evidence that she was hanging out with an unrelated female. We have evidence of them sharing kill sites together, which is pretty unusual and very exciting.
I think a lot of the popular beliefs about mountain lions is that they're really rugged individuals, extremely solitary, not very social, and won't tolerate each other at all. And what we're seeing with these new methods of gathering data, which is really better genetics and better cameras, really open a window into this.
Those cameras are showing that these sites are kind of ecosystems in themselves, and really, it's kind of a new idea, but it's believed that mountain lions are able to actually engineer their ecosystem by providing these mountain lion kill sites that are really a resource for a whole variety of species.
For me, the connection with cats kind of grew with time. And so getting this like several year immersion into the life of mountain lions has created a real deep love and appreciation for them as a predator on the landscape. And yeah, I've grown really attached to her because I've been following her around for 6 or 7 years now, and I found her story so compelling, and I've been rooting for her to survive another winter. And so every season that we pick her up again with DNA, I'm happy. I'm happy to know that she's still on the landscape. She's a successful hunter. She's a successful mother, and she's a survivor.
All right, I'm going to stop the share right there.
So, Allie.
Yes, Kathleen.
I want everybody out there to either raise their hand in the chat box or physically raise their hand. How many of you all would love to have your students have access to these experts who are out on the field, in the field, tracking mountain lions every year and work alongside them? Because that's exactly what this project does. So yeah, I'm seeing most of your hands raised. It's an amazing project. It's with MPG Ranch, which, to put it into context, just so you know, is about 20 minutes south of where Nick and Allie and I live. So those scenes were, I can look out my window right now and I'm there. So it's a pretty amazing place. It's a biological research station. They employ about 45 scientists, and they have a whole web of game cameras and so forth. And they've been tracking mountain lions for the last 3 years, as well as eagles and every other kind of flora and fauna. But their goal is to get that content, that rich content, into students' hands. And when I'm saying students, I'm talking K-12. They also have college internships. But the thing they cannot do is they cannot have students physically coming on site, because it would impact the studies that they're doing. And so to connect kids virtually with those scientists doing that work, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, we want them out, we want kids in the outdoors, we don't want to just have them looking at a screen. But there are times when you cannot do that. And so using the technology as a tool to get the kids engaged is pretty amazing. And so that is one of the projects that we have initialized in combination with our partners at MPG Ranch. So in thinking about your areas, I'm sure you already know of, but what resources are available to you to ignite deep learning? What we have found is an amazing wealth of folks who really do want to work with schools, but aren't really sure how. We do a lot of translation between, because we're educators. We work with our partner organizations on one hand, and then the teachers and students on the other, and we kind of help put those two worlds together. There's also a lot of organizations that we work with that may not have the budget to have staff on that know about education, but they still want to do education outreach. So those are the kinds of things that we do to help bring project-based learning alive.
So Kathleen, there's a question. Is this a wildlife sustainability project? From Daniel? And sort of, it is. Absolutely, a lot of our partners have environmental components to it. We also, I would say typically, the social sciences and the sciences are where a lot of our projects end up playing, but we also have art museums that work with us and connect to us. We have, I'm trying to think of some of our other partners, all different types of content. And so when we're looking at, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but when we're looking at what type of project the students are going to work on, we will often give them a framework with some guidance, and then they'll be the ones that need to come up with ultimately the project that they're working on. So go ahead, our solution.
Well, I wanted to jump in too, Allie, and you know, we talk a lot, Allie and I talk a lot about unintended consequences of project-based learning. And one of the unintended consequences is connecting students to these amazing people who are doing the work in the world. And you saw the woman on the video. Even just having a female scientist who is actually out tracking in the wild is such an amazing example and role model that kids may not get to see in their real lives. So those unintended consequences of connecting people, kids to the people in the world that are doing the work, I think is just amazing. The other thing, and we'll show you this in a minute, is when we go live, a lot of times we will actually be in place. So we'll tell you some funny stories about that. So yeah. We've already kind of talked about this. I think we've hit that. Allie, how do we start these out usually?
Yeah,
these types of projects.
So let me describe what we do. Typically the words we use are scenario-driven, inquiry-based learning. And one of the things that Kathleen and I have observed over the many years, the combined years of teaching that we have been a part of, is that project-based learning comes back up in the vernacular with lots of different buzzwords. And it's been around for a really long time, and it's been called a lot of different things. But when you get to the heart of it, it's good teaching and learning. And so the way that we typically talk about it is scenario-driven, inquiry-based learning. And so all of our, we call them challenges start with a scenario. And the scenario, it sets the scene. It sets the scene. It has a hook. Oftentimes it is a little fanciful, although it's always set in real world issues, problems, things that are always happening. But what we do is we create it so that it's relatable to the audience, whether it's an elementary school student or a high school student or an adult learner. So the things that we always say, it's got to be discoverable, has to be open-ended, has to be relatable. And these are the biggest parts of the scenario learning. We're never going to pigeonhole a kid into one answer and have it be a yes or no, right or wrong situation. So that's the first component of it. With that, we combine it with vetted resources. We have those experts. We have interactive distance learning events. And then we also have our thinking skills templates. And for us, teaching those thinking skills along with this process is so important. So when I'm talking about thinking skills, I'm talking about creative and critical thinking. I'm talking about collaboration, communication, also known as the 21st century skills, the 4 C's. Again, good teaching and learning that has a lot of different titles over the course of the years. But the model that we use, and stay on this slide, Kathleen, what we do is we call it our hourglass. So we like to take really big world issues, those big picture things, and we bring it down to a level that is relatable to students. So that's where that hourglass kind of comes in. That's where we build understanding with the students. They generate ideas. They start to make those connections. They connect it to the things that are happening locally. And then what they're doing is they're creating their projects and they're pushing that out as student voice in the form of their solutions. And we ask students to make their projects something that can be applied to a broader audience. So really narrowing it in and then pushing it out. Okay, go ahead.
Clicking away. So just a quick example, and going back to the Mountain Lion project. The Mountain Lion project certainly isn't the only one that we've got, but since we started with that, I thought we'd be consistent and kind of follow through. So the client says to us, we'd like to do 3 challenges for elementary, middle, and high school. And so we take the content, the very rich content they have, and what they give us is that footage of mountain lions, photos of mountain lions, their tracking data from year to year, the DNA sampling, the pedigree charts, the field notes that they're making. So we take that very rich content, and then depending on the age level of the student, we curate that in a way that is accessible to the students. Mm-hmm. So for example, if it's a pedigree chart for elementary, we might take it down to just one family group, and then middle school and high school might be the whole lion population on the ranch, so that they'll learn how to read a pedigree chart and what that means, and how the DNA links to that. And we have data analysis tables, or whatever it's going to take for kids to interact with the kind of information or the scenario and what we're challenging them to do. So for elementary, for example, with the mountain lions, they would have to learn, the kids need to learn about the habitat, natural history of mountain lions, data on family groups, and their end product then is to take all of that information and write a literacy story, a mystery story based on that, based on evidence from the research. And so that's a chewable thing for not only elementary students, but elementary teachers. are fairly comfortable teaching creative writing and mystery stories and whatever, but this is a nonfiction based mystery story using the evidence from the research gathered on the ranch. So the middle school then changes because they're going to analyze kill sites. They're going to be detectives. They're going to determine who was at the kill site and what evidence do they have of that. And then they're going to put that together in a quick science communication campaign for the general public. And we also like to incorporate real world processes like the ABT framework for science communication. So not only do the teachers learn how to teach the ABT framework, but the kids learn how to use the ABT framework. And that is something that the real people in the real world, the real scientists at MPG, actually just had a workshop on the ABT framework because they need to communicate to the general public, not to scientists necessarily. So we try to incorporate those real world skills. High school, they looked at longitudinal studies, pedigree, DNA evidence, natural history, habitat, and then their responsibility was to come up with a phase 1 wildlife management plan. So they had to examine management plans, what goes into that, you know, all of that. So a way more deep dive into it. The other thing that we always do is we know that teachers are just like students. They may come to us with a lot of experience in biology, for example, with this one, or they may have very little experience and background. So we always scaffold and provide support for teachers depending on their levels of expertise.
Yeah, so I'm going to add on to that just quickly, Kathleen.
Yeah.
When it goes back to some of the problems in teaching in a project-based learning way or whatnot, of course, gathering and developing those projects takes a tremendous amount of time. And student-led projects, to have a successful student-led project, it doesn't take any less time for a teacher to develop and to provide the scaffolding and the structure for that to happen. And so what we do is we try to provide a structure for teachers. And again, it's that middle base of teachers that want to try this out and are feeling a little bit overwhelmed. The expert teachers that we have that have been teaching this way for years, they'll take this and they'll pick and choose which pieces they want to use from it. They'll add on to it. And so it really becomes something that can fit into the classroom for a lot of different teachers. Okay, we had a question.
Oh, it's Nick, and I'm actually answering it. What would it take to have a greater number of educators adopt these types of experiences into their work? I think one thing, of course, always professional development.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we have learned through the years is teachers talking to teachers. Mm-hmm. And so we sponsor a lot of virtual meetups and people just exchanging ideas and breaking down those walls of isolation to get a little bit of confidence to do it.
Absolutely.
So, Allie, we've got about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you want to show them a quick
10.
10 minutes. You know, I'm just going to talk really, our live events, I'm not going to show anything. I'm going to leave some time. We're yammering on quite a bit. Our live events connect the students to the experts. And for us, that's absolutely imperative. Students getting to talk to the experts, learn, ask the questions. Usually they'll be working through the project, and to have somebody to bounce their ideas off of is something that is absolutely invaluable. That, and also seeing the work of the world that's happening. When we do the Mountain Lion project, we'll go in the field with the trackers, and so we're out in the woods on live interactive Zoom call, just like this with the classrooms, and the trackers are able to show them how they gather samples, what they do with the DNA, how the lab processes it, and then the students are able to really talk and ask those questions and build that deeper understanding. One of the things that I think I would be shocked if people didn't agree with this, but maybe you don't. just as a teacher who's been teaching this way for a really long time, I saw a study the other day that came out and it said, oh, a new study links rich content to necessary to deep thinking processes and good education. I'm like, well, of course it does. Like, you have to have that rich, deep content to have those really amazing thinking processes going on. You've got to have a place a diving board, a place to start. So, it's always funny when research comes back and kind of confirms what you've been trying to tell people for forever, that as a seasoned teacher, that this is what works. So that's what we're trying to do with these types of events.
Can I tell the quick funny story though?
Yeah.
About the live event. The other thing that I really believe what project-based learning and what we're doing is so important, and it's seems like such a simple thing, but let's get kids being curious about the world. They're kind of in a bubble sometimes, and they're not really tuned into what's actually happening. So we did work with Hoboken, New Jersey, and we did do the Mountain Lion Project with them. So a quick funny story. We were live on a ridge top in Montana. You just saw where we are. And we were talking to the mountain lion tracker, Joshua. And the kids had asked him how far a mountain lion jumps. And I was standing next to him. And so I ran back in the field about 10 feet. And I said, this far? And he goes, oh no, much further. So I ran back again. This far? Nope. Further? Nope. And he said, a mountain lion can jump about 40 feet. And we had set up the camera so the mountains were behind us. Well, after the event, the teacher emailed us and said, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. The kids were so engaged in it, but they were absolutely amazed that there are actually mountains like that. They thought we were on a set in a green screen studio. So those unintended consequences and just getting kids wondering about the world is really as important as anything else that we do, I think, in project-based learning. Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear any experiences that you guys have had, or any topics that you particularly think you have found to be very valuable for students to really investigate in a project-based way. I think Allie talked a little bit about this. We always include our sustainable development goals, knowing that standards are okay, but they're not everything. And then the other thing that we do is incorporate the 21st century skills that are depicted there in the bottom right-hand corner to build cognitive sweat. Even if kids are not the ones working hardest in the classroom, there's a problem. So that's kind of the premise behind everything we do. And I'm not sure, Allie, what do you think?
I think if there's any questions or anything like that, we'll bypass them. These are different ways that we do all of this stuff. Let's even bypass this. I'd love for you to say just a little bit about student voice and authentic feedback.
Okay. One of the things that we include in our projects always is a review function. So our partners like Joshua that you saw in the video, who's the mountain lion tracker, when students upload their end product, which can be open-ended, no right answers, engage a student voice, all of that good stuff. When they finally upload their final project into our proprietary software, we have a review dashboard where our experts can then weigh in and give the students some feedback on their project, and both narrative and with a rubric. And I believe that's extremely important. I'm a writing teacher also, and always having an authentic audience is so important. And so, we try to incorporate that in everything that we do, so the teachers can look at the projects and grade them, and that's lovely. I won't go off on my soapbox about grading, but that's lovely. But what is really important is that the students hear from the people who are doing the work in the world what it is. Yep, Nick, community partners provide feedback as well. Absolutely. Yeah, I like it. Think parents are in some cases adopting the project-based learning now that they're becoming the teachers. Yeah, no kidding. It's just been really kind of funny because everybody's like, oh, this is great. We can do this, you know? So that's super fun. And with that, we would love to hear your advice for us in our journey of trying to make this easier, more manageable, and more adopted by parents and teachers. And just to mention that any of the projects that we've developed through this last school year are available free to parents and teachers on our website. So the mountain lion projects, the eagle projects, we've got an art project. Huh?
Yeah, the inventive thinking.
Inventive thinking. Yeah, we have a bunch of those up on our website for teachers and parents that all you have to do is register and create an account, and you've got access to that free curriculum. So
yeah, let's open it up for advice, questions.
We have about another 4 minutes or so, and I've been trying to capture some of what you're saying in the chat, as well as provoking you with some questions we can talk about another day. Although the one that has come up in a lot of these video calls in the last couple of weeks has been kind of what's the thing a year from now, what's the thing that we will either be thankful for this disruption, or what will we have learned in a year? So that's one. And then I guess the other thing that came across to me as you were sharing was, can your projects be adopted to, for example, the video was lovely and I liked it just because it was quiet and it's been a crazy day for me. But, and that happens in a typical learning environment too. There's lots of stimulus and there's very little kind of slow down and quiet. But could you envision learners out making the next iteration of those films, you know, so that they have a higher level of investment in telling the story and understanding who their client is, et cetera?
Yeah, and we do actually, I was just talking about that with one of our clients who is a documentary, the Big Sky Documentary Film Initiative. And they are going to encourage students to go out and make a documentary in their own backyard kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It depends on the project. You saw our hourglass. Let's take the mountain lion thing, for example. Students cannot go on that location and
Sure.
obviously track mountain lions. We don't, that's a whole nother level of security. But could they certainly translate the kind of study that the trackers are doing to their own environment? Absolutely. In fact, with Hoboken, again, as an example, we talked to the kids about going out and tracking squirrels and dogs and things like that they have in their environment. To learn that analysis skill, you know.
Well, Kathleen, the other thing with that too is that when we have these projects, how you do the project is very much up to the students. We're very open-ended with what that project looks like, how that project's done, what the content of that project entails. This is all up to students and what the best way for them to present that project to us is. And so we have absolutely had kids go and make videos. They've done animated videos for us. They've done all sorts of different types as part of solutions and submissions that we've received. So we'll get everything from hand-drawn pictures to long documents to movies.
We had kindergartners make eagle puppets out of paper bags and talk about habitat and you know, stuff like that, which was pretty amazing. And
they created a nest for their classroom, and they all worked on, they decided where they wanted their nest. They built their nest. They made their puppets. They decided they needed puppets. It was very cool to watch.
Well, what's been fun is the scientists are usually amazed at what the kids come up with.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this gentle hour together, and we'll take a little transitional break here in order to set up. I want to give people a heads up because I see some names coming in, and I'm just assuming they're showing up considerably early. But up next, we do have EPI, the Turtle Project in Costa Rica, and Liz Wargo in Sandpoint. And then following that, we have Caroline over with Bestetti Architects over in Seattle, Rick Murray in Chicago, and then Emmy and the rest of the partnership team in Columbus, Ohio. So, and then just to cycle back to the comment about videos, a couple hours from now, we have Jim Bentley with the Folks Ranch Elementary School in Elk Grove, California. And their students are paid by the city and other organizations to make videos to tell their stories. And these are elementary school kids that are doing amazing documentary work, essentially. So thank you so much for spending the time with us. And we'll have to catch up
Yeah.
when I'm caught up on my sleep.
Yeah, there you go. Have a great day, everybody. Happy Earth Day.
All right, can you unshare your screen, please?
I bet I could.
There
Yeah.
you go. Thank you so much.
Bye.